Hello everyone and welcome back to the Artificial DM. Today we are going to be covering a story that is a viewer submitted RPG horror story. The story is from Madgirlaz. Thanks again for sharing your story with us. A problem player turned abhorrent DM. So I have never posted here and I hope I never will again. This is a story about how I got into D&D 5e. How I got my friends into it, and the long, bumpy, and ugly road that eventually led to 2 dead campaigns and a long overdue dead friendship. Now this all began back when I was in my second year of high school, which was about 2.5 years ago, so I apologize if I can't remember how some conversations went. I should also probably mention that I'm a high-functioning autistic, so I went to a special school that works much differently than normal high schools. So, I was watching a lot of TFS at the table, and I loved their D&D games so much that I started talking to my closest friend at the time. Let's call him CJ. And CJ said that he had been thinking of playing for a while too, and that we should play together. At the end of school hours, I asked my mother if I could have a D&D player's handbook, and a week later, she got me one. I brought it to school, and CJ and I started studying. We printed out character sheets with the school copier, and made our first characters. I made a human wild magic sorcerer named Rose Quarta, and CJ made a human totem of the wolf barbarian named Frost Gem. This is arguably where the problems began, as there were only 2 of us. I was the DM, however, I still played Rose as a DMPC of sorts. We also had very little time to play. Usually we would only get the 10 to 15 minutes of lunchtime to play, and it wasn't a lot of time to do much of anything. It was Fridays that were a blessing, because on Fridays we had Fun Fridays, where after lunch, you could do anything that you wanted on the computers for the rest of the day. But lucky for us, we were able to convince the teachers to let us play D&D during this time. Since I only had the player's handbook, we were using the very limited monster stats at the end of the book, that consisted of mostly panthers and other mildly dangerous animals. At the time, we had no true main story in mind, and our characters' backstories were pretty basic. I was using this time to learn as I went through the game and slowly became more and more confident in my DMing. I did eventually get the monster manual and the dungeon master guide so that we could have a more proper game, and it was at this point that another one of my friends, let's call him Julian, asked if he could play. I said of course, and started teaching him how to play, as well as help make a character for him. Another thing that is worth noting is that Julian has a mild speech impediment that can make him difficult to understand at times, and it can make him very nervous to play. He may be self-conscious about it, but I never asked him. Together we made the most silliest and fun character I have ever had the pleasure of having at my table. Bob Ross, the half-elf life domain cleric, that worships the elf god of art and nature and is an aspiring painter. Now that we had a healer, we were on our way to bigger and better things. Or we would have been. I can't remember when I started to notice it, but I discovered that CJ was being a classic cheater. He would set his lunchbox up in between him and my line of sight. He would pick up his dice before I could see the number, and he would ask if he could hold his rolls for later. I was not happy, and I asked him on several occasions to move his lunchbox, or to roll in the middle of the table, but every time he made the excuse that he doesn't want his character to die. That is the most piss-poor excuse I have ever heard. Making sure your character doesn't die by fudging dice rolls is not the player's job. It is the DM's job, and only if they feel like you deserve it. But unfortunately, the teachers heard his complaining, and they made a rule that we had to follow, and it unfortunately stuck around. Everyone was allowed 3 rerolls per session. Another thing that was terrible about CJ was that he kept interrupting the game to say jokes out of character. Normally I'm okay with a little joking around, as long as it doesn't distract too much from the game. But CJ would grind the game to a halt, force everyone to pay attention to him, and then start on a 5 to 10 minute long story that has nothing to do with what we were just doing. And these kind of interruptions can happen 10 minutes apart at least. So most of the time, we barely got anything done. This went on for some time, until it was around 2 months before summer break. Our school was having a picnic that was being held at a park, and all the staff were going, and there would be food and activities, and all the kids and their parents were invited. We had planned that we were going to play D&D at the picnic. Everyone had agreed, and I was very excited. My parents had dropped me off and said that they would come pick me up at the end of the picnic, but if I wanted to be picked up earlier, that I just had to text them. I met up with CJ and Julian and handed them their character sheets. They had me hold on to them because they were afraid of losing them, and we started the game. We played for about an hour, CJ's story interruptions and all, when one of CJ's friends showed up. Let's say her name is Fawn. And then they started talking in the middle of our game, and CJ stood up and said he was going to go hang out with her and drop the entire game. The conversation went something like this. I'm gonna go. Wait, why? Where are you going? I'm going to hang out with Fawn. I'll be back later. What do you mean? We are playing a game here. We had this all planned. It's fine. I said I'll be back. When? I don't know. A couple hours? What? The picnic will be over in a couple hours. You know, not everything has to be about you, Mad Girl. At this point, I lost it. This guy has the nerve to say that I think this is all about me, when for this entire half of the school year, he would not stop whining until he got his way or until the spotlight was on him. I had enough. With tears in my eyes of both sadness and frustration, I told him the campaign was canceled, as well as saying that he is a horrible friend and other things that I can't remember. CJ walked away, and I give Julian his character sheet as a way to remember the good times, apologize for my meltdown, and how the game suddenly ended. He understood, and gave me a hug goodbye as I called my dad to pick me up early. Oh, but we still aren't done yet, because just as I got off the phone with my dad, who would appear but CJ's mother? I don't remember exactly what she said, but I remember she was insisting that I hurt CJ's feelings, and that I have to apologize to him. Now let me explain how awful this course of action was. Here we have a mother of an autistic child who has had experience in dealing with them and should, therefore, have experience in dealing with autistic children a bit better than most. And then you have me, an autistic child, who has just barely recovered from a meltdown, who is still sniffling in between words, and who was just deeply hurt by who they thought was one of their closest friends. And what do? You start yelling at this child that your kid deserves an apology, and say, "You have no right to talk to my kid that way!" and other nonsense. I asked her 3 different times to leave me alone, but she refused to, even saying that since I asked her to leave, I owed her an apology too. Finally, I said to her, "I don't owe anyone an apology, especially to you. Get the floop away from me, lady." And I walked away from her and into the parking lot, where thankfully my parents were. I got in the car and told them what happened, and they were very understanding. The next month at school was awkward. I didn't have as close a friendship with anyone else there, so I was not having the best time. On the last day of school, I decided to apologize to CJ, even though I still felt like he didn't deserve it, and we made up. But I learned that he would be leaving my school and would be going to his home school. We still had each other's phone numbers, and we agreed to stay in contact. It was the worst mistake I ever made. Sometime later, I can't remember how long, CJ had asked me to join a D&D campaign that he was running. I said yes, and made a new character and went to his house. Once I got there, there was another one of my friends there. Let's call him Avery. The session was fine, except for the fact that the story was almost the exact same as my campaign. We would have been fighting the same monsters for the same people if I didn't give him an alternative monster stat block. CJ also decided to keep his character, but changed his race to Aasimar. When he did this, he increased his existing stats and didn't correct them from when he was a human before. And what is his grand reasoning for this? Because the big bad evil guy has time powers and resets time, and now there are small differences. So this is the same campaign, but different. I remember that I did become the DM of that campaign too, because CJ's mother did not like us playing D&D at her house. So we started playing D&D at my house, and I guess I became the DM by default. I got Julian in the group early enough to help him catch up. This campaign actually went okay. Everyone had a good time, and I was able to take what I was given and mold it into something I was happy with. We had some good laughs, and we even made a funny inside joke, though CJ kept repeating the joke and made it not funny almost immediately. There was still the problem of CJ stopping the game and his cheating, but once I got a dice tray and made a rule that all rolls had to be made within it, the cheating was significantly decreased. Sadly, this campaign ended on a sour note, where I was having a meltdown because Julian didn't understand the special combat encounter I had made. It wasn't Julian's fault I had a meltdown. I just get overwhelmed sometimes. I was planning another session for sometime next week when 2020 rolled around and shat on everyone's plans. So that game was also dead. Finally, we get the big one. The one that changed everything. One day, CJ called me and told me that he was running a D&D game on Discord that included some of his friends from his home school. I thought, okay, I'm a high school graduate with nothing to do but watch YouTube all day. Why not? I made a character and I joined his Discord server. They had already had one session, so I had to be caught up. Over my entire time being in that server, I became friends with 2 of the 3 other players, Annie, who played a dwarf cleric, and Chris, who played a half-elf fighter. There was also Brody, who played 2 characters, a half-elf and a tabaxi, both of them being rangers. There were several problems with the game that became apparent almost immediately. First, the rolls that CJ called out were almost always nat 20s or nat 1s. This killed any kind of suspense the story could have had. He made nat 20s not special, and they were hard to do. Second, he made a self-insert NPC Marty Stew, and of course, his character gets to have a harem. And last, but certainly not least, is the horrible story pacing and obvious copying of Destiny 2 in the second half of the campaign to obnoxious levels. Just to be clear, we were told this was going to be a Final Fantasy based campaign, and then halfway through, we switched to Destiny 2 for no reason other than CJ is obsessed with it. And as an example on the horrid pacing, let me tell you the exact point it became about Destiny 2. My character, her name was Lilith, was going through some rough points and was struggling to figure out what her purpose was after she got her lifelong goal of revenge. Feeling she had nothing left to achieve, she woke up before everyone else in the group, wrote a letter, and set it down in place where everyone could see it, then went to her favorite spot in the city, the bridge at sunrise, to commit suicide. Thankfully, everyone woke up, saw the letter, and went to the bridge to talk her down. It was a very emotional and tense situation, and while Lilith was on her knees in tears, happy ones now, and the party had a big group hug, a strange man suddenly appears from a portal saying, "It's here!" And then another portal opens and a giant worm god appears out of it. We later found out it was Zal. We all had to roll for initiative. It was very clear that this was an impossible fight to win. The worm immobilized Lilith and Brody's characters because we didn't make a ridiculously high saving throw, so we couldn't do anything at all during the entire fight. CJ's NPC heroically jumps in front of 2 attacks to save Annie's and Chris's characters, but Chris and CJ's characters are separated from the group. We all ended up captured except for CJ and Chris's characters. What the floop? That completely ruined any emotional weight that the previous scene had. That whole thing could have worked if the pacing was better and the fight was less obvious that it was impossible. I had a phone call with CJ and I tried talking to him about the worm scene and how it just wasn't handled right. The conversation went something like this. "So how did you like the session?" "It was okay. I loved that I got my scene done, but why did it have to be interrupted by that worm thing?" "Oh yeah, that was cool, right?" "Well, yes, but it just felt a bit too sudden." "Well, that's how it was supposed to be." "I just felt like it killed the mood, like it could have been handled better." "You didn't like it?" "Not with the way it was set up. It could have been better if you waited a couple in-game days." "Well, we were short on time, and I wanted to get the segment in." "Then why couldn't you have waited until the next session?" "I don't like your attitude. You know this is my D&D game, not yours." "I never said it was. I'm just trying to give you advice and constructive criticism." "Very rude right now. I never made fun of your D&D game." At this point, I just hung up the phone. I was tearing up in anger at how different he suddenly became when I started to talk about different things he could have done. It was at that point I got a text from CJ. "Okay, you're out of the campaign," and I was banned from the Discord server. Now I was in tears, full-blown meltdown mode, crying so hard that I started to vomit. My parents were not home, so that made things even worse. I did send friend requests to everyone on the server, so I could still personal message them. I sent a message to Chris and Annie and told them I was banned. Chris sent me a message back and said that CJ was giving me a second chance if I earn it. With Chris's help, I was able to calm down, and he convinced me to, stupidly, apologize to CJ. Chris also told me that CJ frustrated him too, and that if during a session I needed to vent, or if he needs to vent, we can PM each other. Now, some of you may be wondering, why did you go back to this ass, you dumb butt? Well, I am not sociable in any way. I have no idea where to find other fellow D&D nerds who are looking for another player, and here was a group that already had one of my friends in it. Even though I know he has been bad in the past, it's the familiarity of the person that made me feel comfortable, and trying something new can be scary. So I stayed with a less than mediocre comfort zone that could explode at any second. The makeup process of this was not that exciting. CJ said no at first, but eventually let me come back in on one condition. Lilith had to die. I was able to convince him to have her come back as a ghost though, so I was still in the game. Except now, he had an advantage. Every time I stepped too out of line for his liking, he loomed over me with the threat of banning me from the game. Every word I said, both in and out of character, every action, every dice roll, had to be to his standards. Everyone in the group could feel this now too, so they never tried to speak up to him when he went against the D&D rules for his own benefit, except for me, of course. One Friday, CJ had us all go on Discord to tell us that he just came back from the doctors, and that he has very high blood sugar. This is important to the story. This all came to a head on a lovely Saturday morning. We were supposed to have a D&D session that day at 10:30 a.m., but when the time came, CJ didn't show up. We waited for over an hour. I tried calling him 3 times, but he never showed up, and at that point, we just assumed that he wasn't coming, and we all did our own thing. It was then at noon that I got a returning phone call from CJ, who said he was still asleep. I was annoyed as hell, and I couldn't keep it in no matter how hard I tried. He moved our conversation to Discord and tried to tell everyone to get on Discord as well. Here is how that conversation went. "They're not coming, CJ." "What do you mean?" "Everyone is probably doing their own thing by now. You might as well reschedule." "Why do you have to be so negative, Mad Girl?" "Because. Besides, this wouldn't have happened if you hadn't slept in." "Well, I have a medical condition." "What?" "Yeah. I have high blood sugar. I told you yesterday." That excuse is bullshit. Pure bullshit. Yes, having high blood sugar can make you tired. Does that mean it is okay to be late for your own plans that you made? No, of course it doesn't. And the flooping cherry on top of this crap cake is that he thinks that this excuse will work on me, someone who is borderline diabetic and whose mother has type 2 diabetes. Oh yeah, and I got up on time. That's not an excuse, CJ. What? That's not an excuse. I was just really tired this morning. Alright, I'm gonna go. I left the call, and about 10 minutes later, I was texted by CJ and I was banned from the server again, because I was treating him like crap and didn't care about his health. In actuality, I do care about people's health, as long as they are not used as an excuse to ignore their responsibilities. I later learned from others in the group that CJ has blocked my number and has been saying how mean I was to him, and that you're all safe now. So even though this whole thing was about documenting all the bad stuff that happened, there was a lot of fun and happy moments that I got out of this whole experience, mainly in the second campaign. I will always remember Bob Ross's afro that led to a different dimension. I will always remember that one old lady that kept following us and spying on us through windows or trees. And I will always remember our inside joke, though it became less funny because CJ kept repeating it over and over. You're walking down a wooden path. And while the good memories might not outweigh the bad in this case, I was glad I played those games, because now I know how you are supposed to treat your players, with respect. And to anyone out there who is looking for an extra D&D player, I'm available. Thanks for listening. And then, after OP posted this story, a couple hours later they had an interesting interaction, and so they posted an update. Thanks to all of your support, I managed to find 2 groups that I am going to play with, and one of them is going to start next Monday. Another thing that happened since I posted this was Chris contacted me and told me how he doesn't like being in CJ's group anymore, and how he wants to focus more on school, and asked me for a second opinion if he should stay with the group or not. I told him if the group is one you are not having fun with, and it doesn't align with your schedule, then you should leave and find a group who does. He thanked me, left CJ's group, and I haven't heard from him since. If you're listening, Chris, stay safe out there. Now, for something more interesting. This happened only an hour ago, and is the whole reason for this update in the first place. I was watching YouTube and waiting for a chance to talk to my new DM, when I got a text from an unknown number. Hey Mad Girl, I wanted to know if I could talk to you after 2 p.m. today. Is that okay? I thought that this was probably a distant relative's number that I haven't put in my phone yet, so I responded accordingly. I'm sorry, but who are you? It's me, CJ. Now, it is important to note that the reason why CJ's number came up as unknown was because after the whole incident, I erased his number from my contacts. I didn't block him, only erased him. As soon as I saw it was him, my stomach dropped, and my brain went on overdrive. All I could feel was a sense of dread, yet my brain kept supplying me with smug bullshit like, "Look who's crawling back!" The best part was I knew why he was calling too. The only reason he would be calling me is if he was so low on players in his game, and desperate enough, or stupid enough, to call me and invite me to play. Someone that he hates with a passion, but thinks he can still try to manipulate to get what he wants. I was very interested to see how this went, so I humored him and said yes. 2 o'clock rolls around and there's no phone call in typical CJ fashion. This time though, he had a somewhat viable excuse, as he works and his mom picks him up. So the call happens at around 2:45. This is the basic conversation. "Hello?
Hey,
Hey,
you doing good?
yeah, I've been great. How about you?
I'm good.
So, why did you call?"
So, I have discussed it with the group, and we all agreed that you can come back,
At that, I audibly laughed.
and you can have a second chance.
At this point, I've noticed a pattern that whenever CJ makes a decision that impacts my fate on if I can stay in his games or not, that they are always group decisions, almost as if I refuse to come back, I'll be letting the whole group down. I severely doubt any of the group was involved in any of CJ's decisions. You know that it's never going to be the same, CJ.
I know.
And I mean, you must have known what my answer was going to be before you called.
Huh?
No.
You're not going back?
No. And I don't really want to continue being your friend after all this. But if you apologize, I'll be willing to look past it, and when we hang up this phone, we can move on and go about our lives.
Wait, you want me to apologize?
Yes. CJ, you treated me like garbage. Less than garbage. At this point, I don't even want to be your friend anymore.
Wait, I don't understand. I didn't do anything wrong.
Classic victim blaming and blame deflection. Oh boy, here we go. Alright then, explain how you didn't do anything wrong.
I was just tired that day, and I wasn't feeling good, and you kept trying to wake me up.
What about the other times?
Huh?
Back in my games. The cheating, the constant lying.
I said I was sorry.
He didn't. Not once in the 2.5 years that I have known him has he said he was sorry. But to ensure this argument might actually go somewhere, I didn't focus on that. Okay, but you didn't stop. Not once did you stop. You never stopped. Not until that campaign's final breath did you stop once. If he is losing an argument or has no retort, he will go completely silent. And in your game, the constant disregard of your players' feelings. If I spoke up about a scene that made me uncomfortable, you would completely ignore me. You hurt me. But that's okay. I knew you weren't going to apologize, because in your mind, you did nothing wrong, right? You are perfect and everyone else is bad, right? So you tell everyone else in the group that I'm not coming back and to have fun, and when this call is over, I want you to move on with your life like I have, and not speak to me again. Okay?
Okay.
Alright, goodbye. That was the last call I ever had with him, and I hope to Palor it's the last, as I still didn't block his number, just in case that maybe when he grows up, he might see the error in his ways, and finally get that well-deserved apology. I severely doubt it. Thank you, Mad Girl, for sending in your story. I think with this story, it shows that you can be forgiving as a person. You can go ahead and attempt to bridge the gaps. But sometimes people are manipulative and they are used to getting their way because others around them enable them. You can only forgive people so often. Hopefully the 2 campaigns that you're going to be playing in will be a great time. Hopefully you never have to tell another horror story. May they be full of D&D glory stories from here on out. Also, the Bob Ross character. I can just imagine it. And inside of the afro are tons of little trees, and they all have a tree friend, and lots of happy clouds. Anyway, what did you guys think of the story? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the tale, please leave a like. That's gonna do it for today. And until next time, hope you feel inspired.